Thank you for watching the Browns Film Breakdown YouTube channel. If you're here, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and come over to brownsfilmbreakdown.com, where we have awesome opportunities to join our community of passionate Browns fans covering this team from sun up till sundown with the best information you can find on the internet. Film rooms, newsletters, these podcasts every day unlocked that you will be able to listen to, digest, and have great conversation around. Thanks for being here. We appreciate your support. Let's get to today's podcast. All right, guys, welcome into today's show. It's Browns Film Breakdown. It is Thursday. We have a great show lined up for you. We have a great guest to talk about, Quinshon Judkins. That will be the second part of today's show. And like I said, just a ton of great stuff for you. And we very much appreciate you stopping by to check us out. If you missed yesterday's podcast, where we had a great conversation with John Jansen on the Browns' 5th overall pick, right? Mason Graham, the Michigan legend that is. John gave us all the insight on him, what he thinks of him, the person, the player, what the Browns are getting, and how he fits into Cleveland. It is well worth your time and a great listen. So check that out if you have a moment, right? And then we have obviously a newsletter that went up yesterday. That newsletter built around the idea of the NFL's declining to change the rules on the tush push, which is a popular piece of conversation around the league. It's a buzz thing. I go into detail in that newsletter about really this is blown out of proportion from the Eagles side. Like, there's a thought that this is working every time for Philly. It's not, right? And then there's a belief the rest of the league isn't finding maybe as much success. And I think they are. It's relatively close. Now, the volume for Philly is a little more than everybody else, but they also go about those 1 yard situations uniquely. And some teams prefer to have a little bit of deception baked in, right? And try to chase maybe some bigger plays or some misdirection. And the Eagles don't do that. The biggest difference is that they line up everybody on the line of scrimmage as narrowly as possible. And they tell you we're doing this and there's no other play we can run other than the singular thing we're putting in place. So my thought on this is that issue is that teams, now this was brought up by the Packers, probably the sacrificial lamb, but nonetheless are catching a lot of heat for it, that the Packers brought this up because I think the league is, at least some people their intentions are benevolent. Like, they think there's an injury concern, because what is happening is that you are getting a narrowing of the space and everybody's condensing in a very tight spot. And it's a lot of body parts and limbs underneath players. And like, I do get the concern for injury because it is unique. It is way different than everybody else. Like I noted in the newsletter that the Bills run this, their own version of the short yardage. Like, they ran it 28 times, successful 25, whereas Philly ran it 42, successful 34. It's not that big a difference. Philly just walks 2 players up right behind the quarterback and they push him the moment the snap happens. It's a little different for the Bills. They do have one player, the running back, very tight to the quarterback, but they have a little more deception sort of baked in. They can do some different things and have some way of keeping guys out of the box, right? Those DBs kind of have to honor an aligned player somewhere else, or, there's a chance the ball could be given to the back on the perimeter or a quick throw could be made. So there's some other threat. And even the Browns, who had the second highest conversion percentage on quarterback sneaks, getting 11 of 12, did, have their own version of this too. They would do split backs, but they'd be a little deeper. And I tried to give you some examples of that with film of how they still had players coming in and pushing the quarterback. Jameis Winston was pretty successful with it last year. So they did have guys come in, but they weren't right up next to the quarterback. And they still had either pre-snap shifting or pre-snap motion to sort of, again, keep the defense on their heels a little bit about what we're doing. It's give and take. Philly is just very brazen. They don't care that it's coming, and they don't care that there's no other play they could run. They're as tight and narrowly. It does look very rugby-like. I think if there was evidence that this was causing injuries at a higher rate than normal football plays, maybe even normal quarterback sneaks, you would probably see this outlawed. But that's not the case right now. So I think if the league were to do that, it'd be blocking one team from doing it their way. And that to me is wrong, because every team seems to be doing it differently. Some teams, there are like 4 teams that didn't even run a quarterback sneak last year. So it's a choice, right? The Browns like to do some different things where they maybe offset a running back and they'll sell quarterback sneak and then pitch it out. They've done this for a couple different seasons. They had a huge touchdown against the 49ers in the 23 season lining up on a 4th and 1 and pitching it out, pin pull pitch, right? They used to put Harrison Bryant, the tight end, the reserve tight end, under center and make him do that when Watson or some of the smaller quarterbacks, the PJ Walkers of the world in that group were maybe unfit. They'd like to get the tight end bigger body, but they would toss off of it. They'd pitch it, right? Last year, they had a huge run in the Jags game on a 4th and 1 where they just quick flipped it out to, to Jerome Ford, and he hauled up the sideline. They blocked it. They pin pulled and blocked it well. It's not foolproof, right? They did it against Washington, I believe. A little pitch to sort of sell everything tight, condensed. We're going to run quarterback sneak with Jameis, and they bring him onto the field, right? He's their designated guy, kind of the same way, Jacoby Brissett ran it pretty frequently when he was with the starting that first portion of the 22 season, but they would still, when Deshaun came back for those last 6 games, run him onto the field and have him do it. And then from that, hey, we think they're going to quarterback sneak here. We can pitch it and toss it. But, against the Commanders, it failed. You missed a block. You got cut, and I think Deontay Foreman fell down. So it's not guaranteed, but there is some wrinkle the Browns like to have of, well, we might not sneak it, right? It's different for the Eagles. They're very bold, and they're not hitting the highest percentage of conversion on it. It's failed some, but they do enough of them, right? They led the league in first downs on that play. But I think you're banning a specific way of doing that play. I don't think it's right. They needed 24 votes. They only got 22. It was a 22-10 split. The Browns were on the vote of not changing it. I agree with that. I don't think you should when you look at the data. If the Eagles were using this on like 4th and 2 and 3 or 3rd and 3, if they were using it in more than 1 yard to go scenarios, and they were picking up massive amounts of yards because this was so ridiculous, I think, again, the conversation could be bigger. There are a couple examples where they would run the play and picked up 3, I think like 2, 3, and sometimes the most I saw was 5 yards. But like for the most part, it's getting 1 yard. It's meeting the standard for them. And it has also proven it can fail as well. So I just don't think it's good to change their isolated way of going about it until you have injury evidence or something that says they're doing this at an unbelievable rate for success, even in 2, 3, 4 yard scenarios. Because if you could get under center on 3rd and 4 and just be able to run tush push for 5 yards every time, that's a different conversation, but that's not what's going on here. So the data, I don't think helps. I don't think the approach is being so isolated to Philly that it, tells a story that they're doing something nefarious against the rules. So yeah, you can kind of miss me with it. I think they did the right thing, not banning it for now. We'll see. They can revisit. I mean, this stuff has been around a long time, guys. I mean, the rule was in place for no pushing or pulling a runner through like 2005. If you recall, the biggest like sort of public facing situation with this was when Reggie Bush at Notre Dame pushed Matt Leinart across the goal line and gave him, just a little boost over the goal line on that, clock running down on the 1 yard line scenario where USC won that crazy game against Notre Dame. And ironically, the NFL changed that rule to take it away around that same time frame, that 04-05 area. So, it's not like it was being called before very often. I think the last time, according to everything I've studied, the last time that rule was called before the change in 2005 was like 1991. So it's not like it's getting called very often. And I don't think you're changing it. I don't think they're doing anything that crazy that is so much different and so much more productive and is so dangerous, right, compared to other teams. So I'm just like, I think they did the right thing. So that survives. We'll see if they bring it back up. The Eagles social media team, kudos to them. They were very ready to go. I do want to cover some other changes that came out of those, I guess, the second owners meeting. So they have updated the NFL's policy on onside kicks. You used to not be able to do those until like late in the game. Now you can do them anytime you'd like. You have to declare it. Hey, we're going to do an onside kick, which does take the fun out of the element of surprise of like those, in the Super Bowl, the Colts and Saints onside surprise situation. I do love the onside surprise, but they've eliminated that for safety purposes. But they are now letting teams, if you're trailing at any point in the game, you can declare we're doing an onside kick and have an opportunity to get the football. So it used to be you could only kick it in the fourth quarter of games, but now any point in the game. And I do think that they have moved it up 1 yard. So you usually kick off from the 35-yard line. They've moved it up to the 34 so that you can have a better chance at getting it. So it won't be kicked at the 35. It'll be kicked at the 34. And that slightly increases the chance we could see one come through. Otherwise, they voted on the Olympic Games. NFL players are allowed to have one player from each team be out there for the Olympics. I know a lot of guys will be doing this. I know Justin Jefferson mentioned it would be a dream to win an Olympic medal. Then there's other guys who I think will just not be interested in doing it. Maybe money, maybe contract purposes. They're not allowed. AJ Brown was talking to the Philly media and was talking about, when is that? Oh, it's during camp. Yeah, I'm not going to be out there doing that. Like, there's just going to be some guys that don't do it because of that exact purpose of, we're in camp mode. I can't get hurt. Contract year. There's going to be money play stuff. And I'll be interested to see who actually does it. But I do think there's going to be some big names that will be interested in doing it. So that passed. And then the playoff reseeding. So the Lions wanted to, their pitch was to get the NFL to allow teams to, if you win the division, you can get in the playoffs. That's a way in. That's a free ticket. But you can't have a home game if you're, 8-8 or whatever. Now it's 9-8. If there's teams, like, it's just basically best record gets home games in the playoffs. And I love that. I personally would be a fan of that, because I think teams who win bad divisions, because I had this conversation with somebody recently, like, the last time the Browns won the division was 89, which is just so gross. But, if the Browns were in the AFC or NFC South for the last 20 years, they would have had plenty of division championships, in my opinion. So again, give and take. But my point is, like, I think teams that go 7-9, think back to that Marshawn Lynch run, the big run he had there, and or what is it, the Beast Quake or whatever. That was a bad Seahawks team that beat the Saints, who had to go in and play in that hostile environment. I think teams with better records should get home games. And getting the division win does still matter, because if you win the division, you get into the playoffs. But I think giving teams those home games just isn't always good with me. So I might be in the minority of that. Totally recognize it. Whatever. That's fine. Lions ultimately took it off the table. Doesn't seem like there's support to do that. So we'll see if that ever comes up again. But, those were the four main issues that came up. The Lions didn't even let it get to a vote. They must have had an idea that was not going to work out in their favor. Just again, a reminder about two other things that are coming into play this year. Both teams getting the ball. Those playoff overtime rules are now going to be overtime rules in every format now. So it's both teams get the football in overtime. So there's not going to be like, hey, you go score a touchdown in the regular season, the game's over. The other team will get a chance to possess the football. So that will be the rule that's in place. And that stems from that, Kansas City playoff game with the Bills way back in the day, I think 3 years ago now. And then the NFL adopted the playoff only rule where both teams get the football. Now that's a full-time regular season thing. And then the expansion of the replay usage, right? So we can look at even more plays in 25, hits on a defensive player, grabbing the face mask, horse collar tackle, tripping, running into or roughing the kicker can now be reviewed. So those will be bigger, expanded opportunities there. Hawkeye cameras will be in use for the first time, so there will be better 8K cameras on the field to look at things, and there's going to be some time saved on some of the chain gang situations, so keep an eye out for information on that, as you'll see. And then touchbacks will move to the 35-yard line, so encouraging more kick returns, teams kicking it maybe to the goal line instead of through the goal line. The league moved touchbacks to the 35-yard line in 25. So in 24, if it was a touchback, it was brought out to the 30. Now you get it at the 35. So they're trying to kind of encourage more teams to kick the football in a place that allows for returns to happen. They want that to be an exciting part of things. I think from the data, like 33% return rate in 24. They think under the new policy, it could jump to somewhere between 60 or 70% kicks that end up getting returned. So they feel better about the safety of the narrow collision impact zone as they've changed that rule, right? But they want to see a higher volume of those. So that will happen. And then the last rule that we again talked about way back when is the free agent proposal allows teams to speak directly to free agents during those March meetings. So it'll allow that situation where they don't have to talk to agents. They can talk to the actual players and schedule travel days in the negotiation window. So the old policy was teams weren't allowed to schedule travel for players and could only speak to a player's agent during those early negotiation windows. So that change now is a 1-year trial basis, but it will allow more direct contact, which may ultimately speed up some decisions in free agency and maybe help the second, third wave of free agency. So that's everything as we know it. Let's get to the more fun part of today, which is the interview with Bill Landis on Quinshon Judkins, who is a really fun football player. We broke down that film room. Check out that film room. Goes into deep detail about the traits I like for the running back and how he fits in the Browns offense. But Bill has some great insights from covering him, from his transfer to Ole Miss, obviously his decision to come to Ohio State, and then what he was like, around the program and on the field and his impression. And then Bill gives us some bonus answers about upcoming Ohio State running backs and some fun conversation at the end. So check out Kings of the North, their podcast. He does it with with Doug Lemery. They do a fantastic job on that pod covering not just Ohio State, but everything in the Big Ten and all the football up north that deserves to be covered, that doesn't quite get covered as well as the SEC. So he talks about that a little bit too, and what their initiative is. But it's a great pod. It's on YouTube. You can find it any of those normal podcast places, and they're very entertaining. And we're thankful for Bill giving us a few minutes. So let's get over to that interview right now. All right, Bill, we're happy to have you here. It was Browns rewriting the running back room, and I think so many of us were looking at this Ohio State tandem with excitement about the possibility of figuring out if one of them could end up in Cleveland. They go with Judkins, and I'd love for you covering this, the team in Columbus here very closely and breaking everything down. Talk about some of his reasons for coming to Ohio State. What drew him up north, coming from, a 3-star, super successful 2 years at Ole Miss. That part of it is very interesting to me, considering that, Trevion was already here and established and all of that. So that choice was peculiar.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't surprising that Ohio State added a transfer running back. It was pretty clear if you looked at the roster, they were going to have to. They sort of unexpectedly lost Mayan Williams, was a guy who was pretty productive back for Ohio State, and he had 2 years of eligibility left, and he decided to leave. So they had Travion Henderson coming back, but Travion also, to that point in his career, had some minor durability issues, I would say. Just he wasn't a guy that you said, like, you can definitely give him 250 carries and feel good about him making it through the entire season. So you knew Ohio State was going to add somebody. I don't think anybody expected it to be Quinshon Judkins. That sort of came out of nowhere, and kind of the way it was told is like it came from Quinshon. He went into the portal leaving Ole Miss, and I think he was the one that sort of put out the feelers to Ohio State. And of course, Ohio State is going to be interested when a player of that caliber says, like, hey, I like what you guys are doing there. And then there's a guy at Ohio State named Davis Nigbinosin, who was at Ole Miss for 1 year with Quinshon. So I think that it helped that there was a little bit of a connection there for Quinshon to understand sort of what Ohio State was about. I think in terms of like motivation and why he wanted to come to Ohio State, if you look at what he did at Ole Miss and the workload that he had to carry, I think that there was an interest in maybe going somewhere where he could share that workload a little bit more with somebody, not be a guy who has to carry the ball almost 300 times for the offense. So the idea of like being in a tandem with Travion Henderson, I think was really interesting. For Quinshon, I think Travion had to be not sold on it, but at least like made aware of it and make sure everything was okay. But both guys seem very into the idea. Obviously, Ohio State's a place where you can win at a high level. Ole Miss won a fair share when Quinshon was there, but Ohio State, regularly competes for national championships, and obviously Quinshon was rewarded for that decision by winning a national championship at Ohio State. There was some stuff that seemed to come out from the Ole Miss side. It was like, oh, this guy's selfish, or not maybe not the best guy to have in the locker room. And I was frankly like on alert for some of that, but I never got a whiff of it at Ohio State. So I think it was just a guy looking for a slightly better opportunity, and maybe an opportunity to go to the NFL with slightly less wear on his tires than he would have had if he would have stayed at Ole Miss for a third year.
It seems like he fit in quickly well as far as like the personality goes. He's not over the top. I didn't seem entitled. Again, I kind of, I obviously am here in Columbus, but I can only side eye so much of Ohio State stuff with what I'm doing. But like from the outside looking in, it felt like he was very much a fit in personality in an offense that was pretty dynamic. So talk a little bit, Bill, if you can, about like the personality he brings. And again, I don't mean to speak and try to answer it for anybody, but it always kind of felt like he was very team driven and tried to do everything on the dirty work side he could.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Which is like that was sort of the thing I was curious about, just like given it was just like the social media reaction from Ole Miss fans. So like you probably read too much into it, but it's like, well, this guy left them, they feel scorned, they're gonna portray him in the worst possible light. But you can't help but sort of expect that maybe once Quinshon gets to his new stop. But then, like I said, like I just never. No, I wasn't in the room every day. I can't say definitively that there weren't any, but like I just never heard anything like that. I thought he did fit in well pretty quickly. Personality wise, I would say like he seemed fairly mild mannered, like soft spoken, and in a way like that's funny compared to the way that he plays football. But I think a good guy, like Ohio State is a place that really prioritizes its culture. It's not a program that takes a ton of transfers every year. They're going to be between probably 6 to 10 or 11 most years, and they're pretty calculated about the personality types they are bringing in to the building. I actually can't even off the top of my head think of like a guy that they brought in over the last couple of years who ended up not really fitting. Like, not everyone hit on the field, but I don't know that there's been any kind of personality clashes with anybody they brought into the program, and that certainly um is the truth for Quinshon as well. So I think he understood, coming to a place like Ohio State where there are a lot of big personalities and a lot of like alpha types and guys at the top of their game that are, training at the highest level to achieve the highest possible goals in the sport, that you have to sort of comport yourself a certain way. And I think that Quinshon like more than did that. Like, from the second he got to Ohio State, even on the day that he, and now I believe he announced the day that Michigan won the national title, which like even endeared
Yeah.
himself to Ohio State fans a little
Yeah.
bit too. So I think he's a mature guy. Like, he understood what the deal was and how he had to handle himself.
Yeah, I do recall that vividly. There's an interesting thing here where he is not that everything about the transfer portal is good, but it is interesting for a guy like him to go from an established place at Ole Miss where he was the focal point to fitting in a locker room with guys who have been either, that Ohio State team, as you well know, very veteran group and guys had been there. So figuring out your way to fit in, that I do think helps him in Cleveland, where you come in and there's a lot of established names that have proven themselves, and he's got to stand out there. So I don't want to do the comparison thing here with him and Travion, but like, it is something you can't avoid because he goes
Sure.
2 picks after. So before we get to that, not that the like I said, the comparison makes sense, but what did you like about him? I know, I think a lot of people see some of the skills. We've done film room over here, but I'm curious what you thought of him. Did he meet what you thought he would be, Bill? That's the question, because he comes off of this ridiculous productive freshman season, little regression as I think his team around him, in front of him, stepped back a little bit his second year, but still highly productive at a young age in the SEC. Was he who you thought he would be?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're doing the statistical comparison and look at what he did at Ole Miss and what he did in his 1 year at Ohio State, you might like look at it a little sideways, but you have to understand that he just wasn't asked to do as much, which is why he came to Ohio State. If you look at like his carries per game, I think he was over 20 both years at Ole Miss, and I think last year at Ohio, or this past season Ohio State, was like 12. So that's
Yeah.
that's a pretty big drop in workload, right? So the like raw cumulative stats are just going to look a little different. But in terms of what he brought to the offense, and I think namely like the physicality that he runs with, very much I think met the expectations that I had. I was unsure of what exactly the dynamic between he and Travion was going to look like. Part of that was just a little bit of uncertainty about, Travion making it through the season based off his first 3 years in the
Mhm.
program. So I probably thought going into the year that Quinshon might establish himself as like the number one back. It would have just turned out that it was basically a split the entire season. And it worked out really well for both players. It worked out incredibly well for Ohio State. But I think the mentality that Quinshon plays with definitely showed up when you watched him run when he had the ball, like this, the way that he finishes runs, is something that I think Ohio State really needed. Like Ohio State, for a couple of years struggled in short yardage a little bit, and
Yeah.
I think Quinshon Judkins helped them there. But I also think he kind of helped raise the level of like the entire running back room too, when it came to like running hard and making sure you're falling forward at the end of runs, that kind of thing. Like, it's rare to find a Quinshon Judkins carry where he's not falling forward at the end of it. And I think you would say like the same thing about Travion Henderson last year, but what you would not say about Travion prior to last year. So I think like in that way, they sort of helped each other kind of, accentuate their best traits and even like improve in some of the areas where they needed to improve a little bit.
Yeah, I thought when they had him on the field, and not to say when Travion wasn't, out there, but that it was any different. But he just brought a level of confidence to the way they conducted that offense that I thought was
Mhm.
pretty obvious. That Penn State close that he had was some pretty special stuff across the board. But I would say the question I would have more is not, like I said, direct comparison, but were you surprised that to see Judkins go before Henderson, maybe considering breakaway speed, some of those elements,
Yeah.
because it felt like a lot of folks in the scouting world were a little surprised, not blown away, but a little surprised. But I was curious, someone a little more close to what's happening day to day in Columbus. Maybe there was a little more internal expectation. He was more well-rounded, more proven durable. I just was curious if you were surprised by that move by the Browns.
Yeah, I thought Henderson was gonna go first. I didn't buy it so much, but I saw like even a little bit of like maybe Travion Henderson sneaks into the back end of the first round kind of conversation because
Yeah.
of two things. I think like well, Travion is dynamic, as I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners know. Really good pass blocking last year, just like exceptional pass blocking last year. Out of Travion, and also he brings a receiver element that I don't think Quinshon Judkins quite has. So I thought those two things might push him past Quinshon. Well, Quinshon does things that Travion doesn't either. Like I like the again the physicality I think is more Quinshon's forte than it is Travion's. But Travion has that acceleration that I think
Yeah.
Quinshon Judkins might lack a little bit. So like I figured they go close. And then ended up that they did go very close together. But I was mildly surprised that Travion didn't go earlier. I don't know if that's questions of again his durability. Quinshon is incredibly durable. And if you, I think he only what had like one fumble at Ole Miss
Yeah.
and all the carries that he has too. So I'm sure that stuck out the teams as well. So it's not like one was miles ahead of the other. I guess it's your preference of flavor of running back at the end of the day. So I think they're pretty similar in terms of like the impact they can have on an offense. They just go about it maybe in slightly different ways.
Yeah, the tracing of those. Let's just hope they both are really good. That'd be great, right? Then
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have to embark down the road of what they should have done or could have done, or even from the flip side of that. Because the Browns had this happen with the Sony Michel, Nick Chubb thing,
Hmm.
all those years ago. They came out on the right side of that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. Both guys highly productive. A bonus question on the way out, Bill, which is a significant, you can imagine, amount of crossover between folks who like this podcast and Ohio State simultaneously.
Hmm.
It is probably a scenario for Ohio State fans where you don't know how good you got it until it's over with the running back room specifically. So like obviously they keep reproducing wide receivers. It's honestly laughable, as you know, but the running back stuff this year could get interesting. Some unproven names. So on the way out, just like tell us who's going to carry the burden in that room and what people can look forward to as far as it's not going to be as talented, but there's still some pretty talented players there.
Yeah, I think there are guys that definitely have talent. James Peoples is the young guy, second year back, played a little bit as a true freshman. I thought when he got the ball, he popped a little bit, like in a way that I thought was interesting. He gets compared to J.K. Dobbins. I think some of that is just because they're both from Texas, but I think you can see some similarities in their running style. Though I think Peoples might be a shade taller than J.K. Dobbins was. So I think he's got definite like RB1 stuff for an Ohio State running back if that's the way that they grow. They brought in CJ Donaldson from West Virginia, who over most of his career at West Virginia played around like 235, 240 pounds. And this spring at Ohio State was like kind of closer to 225. And I think intent on dropping even some more weight to try to get a little quicker. And he was pretty productive at West Virginia, also used to sharing a workload. So that helps too. So I think with those two guys, Ohio State should have a pretty potent 1-2 punch at running back. I don't think, to your point, as good as Travion and Quinshon, but I still think more than enough for what Ohio State needs at the running back position. And then the other guy who's a bit of a wild card, I would say, is Bo Jackson. He's a true freshman from Cleveland. He's got a lot of juice. He's coming off of a high school injury that cut his season short, but he was healthy in the spring. Coaching staff kind of raved about him a fair amount. I was almost surprised by how much they raved about him, given that they had Peoples coming back and Donaldson coming in. But it seems like they believe that they have three guys with Peoples, Donaldson, and Jackson as a freshman who can handle the workload. And I think the one thing that Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson did for Ohio State last year is give Ohio State a blueprint that now it can use moving forward, which is to say, like, they're probably not going to have a guy who's going to carry the ball 250 times anymore. They're going to want to spread those touches out. And last year it kind of just worked out where they kind of only had two guys they could do that with. But this year maybe they'll have three or four, and it'll be like a committee approach, but a pretty talented committee. So I think Ohio State will be okay.
Yeah, the confidence it takes to go by Bo Jackson. You got to have
His name is actually Lamar Jackson, and they call him Bo.
Right. That's right. So to go by that comfortably, you got to have some swagger about you. Again, I said one bonus question, but I'll give you a second, which you might not know, but that's okay. The kid, is it Savion Hitter, the number one kid in this class, 26? Do you feel like they got a good chance on him?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be the recruiting guru. I don't know. It seems like it. I guess I would say that Ohio State's new running backs coach, Carlos Lachlan, is pretty good. That was a heck of a hire for Ryan Day.
He came from Oregon, right?
Came from Oregon in the middle of spring practice last year when Tony Alford left for Michigan, which was another thing that Quinshon and Travion had to navigate, Quinshon especially. So he's an aggressive recruiter and really good at that, really good at the relationship building piece of that, which I know NIL maybe supersedes that now. So without knowing the ins and outs of that recruitment, I would say that I would give Ohio State a pretty good shot with any running back that Carlos Lachlan puts his sights on, because he seems to be quite good at this.
All right, you heard it here. Bill's predicting predicting a commitment. Yeah, there we go. All right, man. Listen, thanks. We appreciate it immensely. Tell folks where they can find your pod and all your guys' work you're doing with Doug over there.
Yeah, Kings of the North is the name of the show. We do a lot of Ohio State, but also most of the Big Ten. Basically, even though every college football show is SEC centric and Southern football centric, we just sort of flip it and talk. Yeah, so Kings of the North College Football on YouTube is where you can find myself and Doug Lameries.
Very, very much worth your time, guys. Big thanks to Bill for being here. We will be right back. All right, a big thank you to Bill for taking time to do that interview on Quinshon. That was great. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Have another one coming up here with a interview on Carson Schlesinger. So we're going to have some more information on him. We have one set on Dylan Sampson, and we're working on a few others as well. So we should get those ironed out, put out to you guys in no time. And they're working out well. I was a little nervous we could get to those and have the interview set up and all of that, but it is working out that we can get some information from those close to those players. So excited for that. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for stopping by, checking out things at brownsfilmbreakdown.com. And again, I encourage you, if you are not already doing so, come over and support us. It really helps us. All the money basically from your subscription goes to funding better content, better stuff we put out on your Cleveland Browns, and driving a better platform for the community of Browns fans that I think is pretty unique. So thanks for being here. Thanks for stopping by. Check out tomorrow's podcast, or we'll have even more just like this. Until then, we thank you for being here, like I said, and go Browns.